Always wanted to make jewellery but don't know where to start? That's what we're talking about today. Hello, welcome back. My name's Carol. Today I'm going to be talking about the basic tools and supplies that you need to get you started on your jewellery making journey. So let's start off with tools. There are some basic tools that you need to get you started, and I'm going to be talking about those. I will add in a few additional ones that might help you, but they're not essentials. And so we're going to talk just first about the essentials. What you will need is 2 pairs of chain nose pliers, a pair of round nose pliers, and a pair of flush cutters. Now I will talk to you about those in detail. As I said, you will need 2 pairs of chain nose pliers. Now what I have in front of me here are 4 pairs of chain nose pliers, and I wanted to show you the difference between them and what you need to look for when you're purchasing them. So when you are purchasing a pair of chain nose pliers, what you're going to look for is that the inside of the jaw here is flat. So you do not want a ridged pair. Don't go to the hardware store and buy a pair of chain nose pliers, because you will find that they have ridges on the inside of the jaws, and that will mark your wire, and you don't want that. So you need to make sure that your jaws are flat. The other thing that you want to look for is nice pointy ends to your pliers. So I've got 4 pairs here, and they all are different. So for example, this one, the points are quite pointy, but they're not as pointy as these ones. Now these ones have a shorter jaw, but they are very pointy, and they're quite narrow, and they get into all those little tight places. This pair too has a nice pointy end, but they have a longer jaw. And this pair, they have a shorter jaw, but they're not quite so pointy. The other thing you need to look for when you're looking for chain nose pliers is comfort. Now you can't always open the pack and have a feel of your pliers, but what you can do is kind of size them up for the size of your hand. So I have quite a small hand, and so pliers that are too large actually are uncomfortable for me. And now you use your chain nose pliers quite a lot, so it's important that they're comfortable. So these ones here have a plastic handle. They're not too bad. They're a good size for my hand. They're not too bad in terms of softness as well. These ones, they've got a nice fat handle, and I quite like that, but they are made of hard plastic. They're also a good size for me. They are reasonably comfortable as well. Even though the plastic is quite hard, they're a little bit squashy. This pair here, they are a good size for me, and the handles are made from a kind of hard rubber, and these ones are very, very comfortable to use. These ones here, now they are too big for me. You can see there they are quite large, and I find them quite challenging to use. And the other reason I find these quite challenging to use is that the handles are metal. So when I'm hanging on to them for a long time and squeezing a lot, my hand gets quite tired. So even though they look really cool, these chroma pliers, I don't use them very much because they are a little bit uncomfortable to use. So my ultimate favourites are these 2 here. They've got nice pointy tips, and they are both comfortable to use. Now the other thing you might want to think about when you're talking chain nose pliers, I've got 2 more pairs here. These ones are bent nose pliers, and they're quite good for getting into those little places that you can't get your straight nose pliers into. They're not essential, but they are a good addition to your toolbox. And these ones are my chroma flat nose pliers. Now you'll notice the difference between those and my chain nose pliers is that they have this wide tip. Now the wide tip is really useful for wire wrapping and getting really nice sharp bends. So I do use these ones. The next thing on the list is a pair of round nose pliers. Now round nose pliers are used for making loops, and they are vital. So you also need to look for comfort with your round nose pliers, and once again I've got my chroma ones here. Same reason, the handle is a bit uncomfortable for me, but I also have this pair, and these have that nice soft handle, and they're a good size for me. The other thing to look for is the length of the jaw. Now you want your jaw to be nice and long, and you want it to be pointy. And that way I can make loops that are really small if I put my wire at this end, or larger if I put it at this end. Now these pliers, the jaw of them is actually a little bit rough, not too rough, but it grips the wire really well. My chroma pliers, these ones are a little bit slippery, and so sometimes when I've got the wire in there, it can slip around a little bit, and so I don't use these ones as much. Not sounding very good for my chroma pliers, but believe me, there are advantages to having this set as well, which I'll talk about shortly. All right, next we're talking flush cutters. Now you need flush cutters, obviously, to cut your wire. So comfort isn't quite so important with your flush cutters as it is with your chain nose pliers, because you're not holding them for long periods of time. So you kind of go and do the cutting and then put them down again. But things you do want to look for are tips. So once again, these ones have a nice pointy tip. Now you'll see if you look closely, mine actually have got a bent tip, and so I need to replace them. I have been saying that for ages and I need to do it. But these Plato ones, they are also very comfortable because they have this nice soft plastic handle. But they have very fine tips, and that's really great. These ones are an old pair of cutters that I have from way back, and they are good because they're really strong, but they don't have nice fine tips like my Plato ones. Now these are my chroma ones, and you can see there they don't have the fine tips either, but these are very, very strong. So if I'm cutting something really hard, like maybe some 18 gauge or 16 gauge wire, these ones are the ones I turn to. So there are advantages to having this set of pliers. Now the other thing that is essential is a ruler. Now I tend to use my 30 centimetre or 12-inch ruler, and I use a metal one because then my flush cutters don't scratch it when I get really close to it when I'm cutting. You can use any size ruler, but that's what I choose to use. So those are the basic tools that you need to get you started. That's only 4 pairs of pliers, so it's not an expensive hobby to get into. It can become expensive because beads are incredibly addictive to buy. So yeah, that's another story for another day. All right, so as well as that, I'm going to talk now about some additional tools that will make your life easier. These are my favorites. We're going to start by talking about a bead design board. If you're designing a necklace, a bead board is invaluable. What it does is it allows you to lay out your beads nice and easily without them falling all over the place and flying off the table. You know, beads are rolly things. So what I've got here is my small bead design board. Now I have it in a larger size as well, and I also have a bracelet design board as well. Now what you do is you lay your beads in the channel here, and you can take them out and move them around without them going everywhere. So it does make life easy. The other reason I love my bead design board is because I stop and start projects. So for example, I might have a necklace laid out here and I think, oh gosh, I've got to do something else, or it's just not working today. And what I can do is pop it away in the bead design board. Now I usually do cover it, pop it away and come back to it another day when I either have more time or I'm more focused, feeling more creative, whatever the reason is. And so the beads are all nicely housed there and they don't roll away. So that is my bead design board. And as I said, I think it's invaluable. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about are crimping pliers. Now, some would say these are essential. I don't, and I'll talk to you a bit more about that in a minute. So what are crimping pliers and what are they used for? So when you string a necklace or a bracelet, you need something to stop your beads falling off. Enter the crimp. Now, the crimp bead is a small bead. Generally, it's only 1.5 or 2 millimeters in size, and it's designed to be squashed. So once squashed, the crimp bead holds everything and stops it coming undone. So it's pretty vital. Now I have 2 pairs of crimping pliers in front of me. Of course, if you've watched my videos before, you know I love my magical crimping tool, and it is my absolute favorite. What it does is it makes your crimp bead look like a metal bead. It is a 2-step process. The other reason I love these pliers is because it means you no longer need a crimp cover. Now, I had a comment on a video I did just a few weeks ago, and it was that crimp covers are my kryptonite, and that is so true. I have struggled with them ever since I started making jewellery, and I absolutely hate them. So using my magical crimping tool means I don't need to make that struggle anymore. All right, I also have here a pair of Jewellery crimping pliers. Now this also is a 2-step process. Now what this one does, in the first step, it flattens your crimp bead like this, and then it folds it in half in the second step. Now when I published my 3 ways to crimp video, I got a little bit of flack because I said that it was okay to just squash your bead with your standard chain nose pliers and leave it at that and not fold it in half. And someone said to me, you know, you should teach them the way to do it properly the first time, etc., etc. Now, for me personally, when I first started making jewellery, I could not, for the life of me, fold that crimp bead over. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get it right. So I just squashed it, and that was actually the way I was shown as well. I've never had a squashed flat crimp bead fail, and yes, they don't look very pretty, so you do want to put a crimp cover over them, but they work. And so for me personally, I think it's okay to just squash your crimp bead flat. But that's up to you. If you want to go the next step and fold it in half, that's fine. Even better, grab a magical crimping tool and you won't need to worry about any of that. With the next one, I went back and forward as to whether or not I should add it to the essential list because I find them essential, but that doesn't mean that you will find them essential. I'm talking about a bead stopper. Now, a bead stopper is a spring-like object that it basically has a handle on each end. And how you use it is you pull it open and you pop a piece of wire, your tiger tail generally, inside. And you can give it a pull and you notice there that it isn't moving. So basically it holds everything together and it stops your beads rolling off. So when you put your beads in your bead board and you want to go away, you make sure you put a bead stopper on the end of your wire so the beads don't fall off. So this to me is essential, and they are not expensive and I think well worth it. And I would buy 2 of those if I was starting to make jewellery. I have included my one-step looper in this list because it is the tool that everybody loves and everybody covets. Now, I actually had to save up for mine and it was well worth it. Now, if you haven't watched the video all about the one-step looper and how it changed my life, I will link it here so you can watch it. Basically, what it does is it makes the loop all in one step. So it makes the loop and cuts the wire in one go. Now, there are places where you cannot use your one-step looper. So, for example, if you're making a wire-wrapped loop, you need to use your round nose pliers for that. Or sometimes it doesn't get in as close as I would like, and sometimes when I'm using really fine glass beads, it can shatter them. So you want to be careful. So no, it does not replace the need for a round nose plier, but if you want one of these, they are amazing. The next one I'm going to talk about is a memory wire cutter. Now, memory wire, if you've not used it before, is a very strong wire. It's made of stainless steel and you can stretch it out and it goes back into shape. Now, you will only need one of these if you're intending to make memory wire bracelets or memory wire necklaces or make earrings from memory wire. Now, I am wearing a memory wire bracelet today. I make these all the time. I love these. And if you want to make this one, I'll leave you a link in the description box below for the video tutorial for that. I'll also leave you one for my earrings. Can't leave you one for my necklace because I haven't done a tutorial on that. But it's basically a gemstone and a small bead interspersed on the wire. Nothing very interesting. I'm sure you can figure that one out. All right, so your memory wire cutters, they're a different shape from your standard pliers and they are really tough. They're made of tough stuff so they don't dent when you cut your memory wire. Now, if you don't have a pair of memory wire cutters, that does not mean that you can't use memory wire. What you will need to do is grab an old pair of cutters. Now, these pair, they're really old and they have chinks in the jaws already, and sometimes I do use them for cutting my memory wire. So you can do that if you can't get a pair of memory wire cutters. So those are all the tools that I'm going to talk about. So next we're going to talk about some supplies that you need. Now, the supplies that you need obviously depends on the type of jewellery that you're making. For example, if you're just going to be making stretch bracelets, you don't need any tools and you don't need any of these supplies, really. All you need is some elastic, a needle, a big eye needle. You will need a bead stopper and some scissors, and that's pretty much it. So it does depend. But if you're going to be making jewellery with wire and loops and all of that kind of thing, you will need the tools that I've just talked about. So we're going to start by talking about findings. Now, what are findings? They are things that go along with your jewellery, things other than beads. So things like clasps, crimp beads, crimp covers, jump rings, that kind of thing. So we're going to start by talking about jump rings. And jump rings are made of wire and they can either have a split in them or they can be soldered. They are generally round, but they do come in other shapes like ovals and even triangles. Now I've got here a couple of different jump rings. These ones I've got here are 6mm. And you'll see this one is open. So these ones have a split and these two are closed. Now they are in a good gauge wire. So this is an 18 gauge. When you're looking for a jump ring, you want to, especially when you're starting out, you want to find them in a reasonable gauge, not a fine gauge, because fine gauge ones aren't as sturdy as the heavier gauge. Now, if you can't see the gauge written on the packet, that's okay. Just look for that sturdier wire. I've also got some 8mm ones here. These ones, if I didn't say, were 6mm. These ones are 8. Now, jump rings come in all sizes. Jump rings are used to connect things. So, for example, you'd use a jump ring to put your clasp on. Speaking of clasps, let's talk about clasps next. It's pretty obvious what clasps are used for. They are used to connect two ends of a necklace or a bracelet. There are lots and lots of different clasps, but I would start, if I was starting jewellery making, I would start off with a 12mm lobster clasp, which I have in my hand here. So this one, you've all seen them. I don't need to explain what they do. Now, you can buy other clasps. I personally really love to use a toggle clasp. And how this works is this part goes through the loop. I like to use toggle clasps because they're easier for me to do up. I find doing up my clasp at the back of my neck can be quite challenging. Even if I bring it to the front, I find it quite challenging. It's quite tiny and fiddly to use. So I personally like to use toggle clasps. But if I was beginning jewellery making, I would use my lobster clasps first. Now, clasps come in all shapes and sizes. I've actually got one here that is a hook and eye clasp that is actually a snake. Oh, I don't like snakes. But you can see that's a very decorative clasp. So, as I said, clasps come in all shapes and sizes. So just don't get carried away buying too many when you start. Buy a pack of lobster clasps and go for it. Crimp beads. Okay, we touched on crimp beads before, but I wanted to show you one. As you can see, it is a tiny 1.5mm by 1mm tube, and they are designed to be squashed. Now, you will need, if you're making earrings in particular, but for all jewellery making, you will need some head pins and some eye pins. Now, I find eye pins optional, but head pins essential. So these ones are 5 centimetres long, and you'll see that all it is a piece of wire, and it's got a flat head on it. Hopefully you can see that. Now, they don't all have flat heads. You can buy them with balls and all sorts of decorative things. They also often also come crooked and bent like that, or worse. But that's fine. You can straighten them out with your pliers. Now, if you're making earrings, for example, you would thread your beads onto the head pin and make a loop at the top and attach your ear wire. It's that simple. Eye pins, I find, as I said, optional. It's exactly the same, except it has a loop on one end. Now, the reason I find them optional is because I generally make my own. I've got a component here that I have used an eye pin for, and so I've got an eye pin loop on one end, and then I've made my other loop on the other end. So you generally do make a loop on the other end. So that's up to you. Personally, I find eye pins optional, but head pins aren't. This one's pretty self-explanatory. You are going to need some ear hooks if you want to make earrings. Now, ear hooks come in all different sizes and shapes, from this standard one, which is a twist ear hook, to a clip-on. So there's lots to choose from, so pick the ones that are right for you. I've included bead caps here because personally I find that they give your work a professional finish and they give you something special. I've got one in my hand here. This is a 6mm one. And what they do is they kind of cup the bottom of the bead. So if I pop a bead on there, you can see, hopefully, that it is kind of cupping the bottom of that. Maybe I should have included those in the bead section, don't know. I've added chain here as an option. It's not essential, but I do use it a lot. When I'm making a necklace, for example, I use chain to extend it so that I don't need to use as many beads. So generally, I'll put a piece of chain round from the top of the beads round to the back of the neck and to the clasp, and that just negates the need for so many beads. The next on the list is German-style half-hard wire. Wire comes in many shapes and sizes. Now, the best wire to begin with is a 20 gauge and a 26 gauge. If you can only get one, get the 20 gauge. Half-hard is a medium temper. Temper refers to the hardness of the wire. So you want it to be medium so that you can easily manipulate it, but it will hold its shape. Don't worry about getting gold-filled or silver wire. Just get a good old copper plated wire. So for example, I've got two in front of me. This is actually a copper wire and it is a 20 gauge. And you'll see there it's quite easy to bend but it will hold its shape. This one is a 26 gauge, and you can see if I lay them out together, there's quite a difference in the thickness of the wire. Just because I had the copper here, I thought that might be a bit confusing. So this is a silver-plated wire. It is a copper core, and it is silver-plated on the outside. So that's the sort of wire that you will use for making components like the one I showed you before, this one. You would use a half-hard wire for that. Now, there is another wire that you will need if you're going to be stringing necklaces, and that is tiger tail. Now, I've got a piece of tiger tail here. It's actually quite amazing. It's a miniature braided stainless steel wire, and it is covered in nylon. So even though it doesn't look very fat, it is incredibly strong. I could not break this if I tried. Sometimes I have trouble cutting it. Now, it is very strong. So that means that your beads won't fall off. Basically, your necklace won't break. Comes in lots of colours. I've got a purple one here, of course, my favourite. You can get it in gold, silver, black, and colours of the rainbow. So if you're going to be stringing necklaces, you want to buy some of this, and it's reasonably cheap too. Now, I already touched on memory wire. Memory wire is made of the hard stainless steel wire, and it holds its shape. I'm not even going to talk about it anymore, except that you will only need it if you're going to be making memory wire jewellery. The other thing I'm including here is stretch elastic. It's not a wire, but I did include it here because it is a stringing material. And I get lots and lots of questions about the elastic that I use. Generally, I use between a 0.6 millimeter and a 1 millimeter elastic. Now, this one I've got in my hand here is a 0.06. And as you can see, it's quite sturdy. I can pull it pretty hard and it won't break. Elastic also comes in lots of different colours. But just remember to pre-stretch it before you use it. Otherwise, it will stretch during wear and you will have gaps between your beads. Now, if you would like to see a video on how to use the stretch elastic and tie your knot for your stretch bracelet, I will leave a link to this video all about how to do that. The last thing we need to talk about is beads. If you're still with me, I imagine that you already know there are millions and millions of different beads to choose from. They come in glass, acrylic, metal, wood, and even lava. You can get overwhelmed buying beads, and it's such a hard thing because you can get so carried away buying them and then you don't use them for things. So my advice is just get some real basic beads to start with and throw in 1 or 2 accent beads. 6 millimeter and 8 millimeter beads are a good place to start. As far as size is concerned, they generally go up in 2 millimeter increments. So for example, you have 4 millimeter, 6 millimeter, 8 millimeter, 10 millimeter, etc., etc. Now, I would buy smaller amounts of beads to get you started because you do not want to end up with a whole pile of beads that you don't use. And of course, there are seed beads. I use seed beads to accent my jewellery, but some people use them for the entire design. This is generally done with a needle and thread, and it's called bead weaving. I've got a couple of examples here. I used to do bead weaving, but I found it too time consuming. So here's an earring that I made way back in the beginning. It is using tiny 15-0 seed beads all around the inside, and they get bigger as they go out. It was a mission. This one, not quite so long. This one uses duo beads with 2 holes. That one too is made with a needle and thread. Now, if you're interested in bead weaving, there is an excellent tutor on YouTube called Jill Wiseman, and I will leave a link in the description box to her channel because she does the most fabulous work, and I just love watching Jill. Now we've talked about all the tools and supplies that you need. Let's talk about where to start. Personally, if I was starting making jewelry, I would start with earrings. Earrings are quick and easy to make. They don't take many supplies. In fact, you can make a pair of earrings in less than 5 minutes. And I have a whole series of earrings that I made in less than 5 minutes. I will leave a link up here to this video, which is a compilation of my 5-minute earrings. Earrings are also excellent at teaching you the techniques that you use. For example, you'll be making loops and wire wrap loops. You'll be cutting, that kind of thing. Now, once you've mastered earrings, you can move on to stringing, necklaces and bracelets, and then memory wire bracelets, etc., etc. So here's a condensed list of the absolute must-haves for your jewellery making tools and supplies. You will need 2 pairs of chain nose pliers. You will need a pair of round nose pliers and a pair of flush cutters. You will need jump rings. You will need 20 gauge German style wire. You will need tiger tail, clasps, crimps, head pins, ear hooks, bead caps and beads. And that's it. That's not too many things when you think about it, and they're not too expensive. I love jewellery making because it isn't an expensive hobby. I know this video was long, but there was a lot to cover. So if you've enjoyed it, remember to subscribe so that you will see my other projects up and coming, and also check out my older projects. Also hit that notification bell so you will be notified when I upload a new video. Remember also to check us out on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you so much for watching today. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you again soon.